and where we plan to go. So I want to kick it off as we have for most of these sessions. And this one, unlike the winter one where we tried to put everybody in their own industry, which I think was very helpful, and our senators and representatives got to hear from industry specific needs and challenges. This one in the spring, we're pulling everybody together. This is really about an update for the next 45 days or less, and then the session is over. So we thought it would be good to bring everybody together and have our delegation update everybody. So with that in mind, I do want to go around the room and first have a welcome and introduction of our senators and representatives on the call. So if you would just tell us your name, and if there's a district or a region that you serve, and then quickly, let's keep it to 2 minutes, some of the committees you've been serving on. We will have time to get to more of the details of what you've been working on in those committees, but just tell us to help our members know what committees you're on. And I will start with Senator Sears. Would you introduce yourself?
I have to remember to unmute.
You should be a pro at this by now, Senator.
You would think, but anyhow, I chair the Senate Judiciary Committee, and I'm a member of the Senate Appropriations Committee. Dick Sears, representing all of Bennington County, plus the town of Wilmington and Windham County. I would say our major focus this week on the Appropriations Committee will be the 2022 fiscal year budget, which includes a lot of one-time money, both general fund one-time money that's been saved from the earlier COVID relief packages, and the new money that's been appropriated by Washington, D.C., although we really don't know what some of the ground rules are for that money. So it makes it more difficult. One of the subjects that Senate Judiciary Committee will be taking up is the restart of our criminal and civil justice system. And any of those of you who have either cases in criminal court, hopefully not, but if you have cases, we need them to get started. But in civil court, there's been a tremendous holdup because of the huge backlog. So we're going to be talking about the money it will take to get rid of that backlog in both systems. And without jury trials, it's hard to get settlements on lawsuits. Whether you're in the position of defending yourself or you're suing, they're both very difficult. So it's held up all that. We also have the problem of for landlords and tenants in eviction matters that have all been held up. And I've heard from a number of landlords who would like to sell their property, but unable to sell their property because the tenant is unwilling to move and they can't evict the tenant, and even despite a lot of damage. So those are some of the subjects we're looking at.
Great. Thank you, Senator. I'll go to Representative James. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm State Rep Kathleen James, and I represent, along with my district mate Seth Bongartz, the communities of Arlington, Manchester, Sandgate, and part or most of Sunderland. And I have been focusing my work this session so far on education. So I serve on the House Education Committee and also have been serving on the Select Committee on the Future of Public Higher Education in Vermont. And the Select Committee is actually just wrapping up its work. We've delivered a final report to the legislature and the governor on the future of the Vermont State Colleges. And as that work is going on, the House is also the House and the Senate have also been working on a pretty substantial funding package for higher ed as well. And that work includes in various bills. The bills get a little confusing at this time of year as provisions move from the budget to other bills, but some of the things we're looking at for higher ed include another round of scholarships for the graduating class of 20 and 21 to take up to 2 classes at the Vermont State, anywhere in the Vermont State College system. and also up to 2 classes for any adult Vermonter who's looking to upskill or change jobs or simply gain a skill. And there are other scholarship proposals in the work, like the Welcome Home Scholarship, which would provide a bit of money to any Vermonter who's been studying out of state and wants to return or come back to school after the pandemic. So there's also a workforce development component to the scholarship money. And I'm sorry that I don't have the list of occupations, the full list of occupations with me right now. But again, through the state colleges, it's a workforce development bill that would provide scholarship support in critical occupations. So occupations that our economy needs. And I know some of those include mental health counseling, perhaps substance abuse counseling. I'm sorry, I don't have the list. Some of the trades, accounting, bookkeeping, et cetera. So lots going on at the higher ed level. In the Education Committee, we've passed out our 3 big bills that are now under consideration by the Senate, dealing with school, the state of our school buildings, literacy, and a concept known as community schools. And this week, we're going to be taking up a bill that's of interest across the state on the weighting study. And I've probably used up my time, so I'll stop. But if anybody has questions about the weighting study, we can discuss that later, or you can send me an email. It has significant implications for tax rates and how we fund our students in every district across the state.
Great. Thanks, Representative James. I'll go to Representative Corcoran. Good morning.
Morning. I'm Tim Corcoran, and I represent Bennington District 2-1, and I serve on the House Transportation Committee. And what we've been doing is we typically deal with 2 bills throughout the session, our T bill and a miscellaneous DMV bill. It was probably 2 weeks ago. I don't know, time flies here, but probably about two weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, we did pass out our T bill. So that's now over on the Senate side, but that entailed roughly around $680 million of funding for your local bridges, your highways, your Amtrak, your airports. And, you know, some of the highlights in that bill, or at least I think their highlights are, was the monies that went back to the towns. Town highway aid, that's based on your road mileage for each town, is typically around $26 million. We were able to do a one-time increase funding for that program of roughly $3 million. So it's roughly $29 to $30 million. We added some monies for class 2 program, your grant programs. And we increased the eligibility of the max grant amount, which is typically around 175. So now towns can, if ultimately passed, receive up to 200,000 per grant application. And I would say the second highlight is the continuation of the electric vehicle, your EV funding. That was a program that we implemented 2 or 3 years ago. It's been quite popular over the years. It's based on your income, how much you could get, but I think it caps out around $4,000 per application towards this program. And we pumped in another I think it was $2 to $3 million into that program. So those were some of the highlights for the T bill, and currently we're working on the miscellaneous DMV bill, and that's sort of like a hodgepodge of all your DMV laws. I think one of the highlights that might come out of that is highway safety portion. There's a couple committee members that have concerns over texting and driving. It seems like we really haven't got a handle on that. There's been a lot of accidents, and so the question is, how do we tackle that? Do we increase the points, which is currently 3 points? Do you increase that to 4, 5, 6 points to really get people's attentions, or do you increase the fine penalty? But as we're looking into it, the fine portion probably doesn't pay out too well, because it seems like a lot of younger generations are started doing the texting. Not saying that the older population doesn't, but so it's if a younger, usually the parents would pay that fine. So we're looking at the point aspect of it, because if one loses their license, I think that's probably a bigger deterrent for the younger generation to say, hey, let's not do that. So those are the the two bills that we typically work on, and we're coming down to the home stretch, and we'll be passing the miscellaneous DMV bill out probably if not the end of this week, but the week after. And so those are the two things that we deal with. Nothing exciting, just same old.
Well,
But
this year you get a bunch of money. So like
we get a bunch of money. The feds have been quite generous in the monies that they've allocated. And I'm sure other members will talk about some of the bigger aspect, whether it's broadband and child care. But the transportation should be seeing even actually another injection of funds there too, because President Biden just put forth the infrastructure plan, which was, I think it was $1.2 trillion. And with having Senator Leahy and Bernie Sanders on those very important committees, Vermont is going to see a great windfall, I believe, if ultimately, that's a big question whether or not that's going to get funded, because it's the funding aspect of it is controversial. And so I'm not sure if that's going to see the light of day, but I'm sure at the end of the day, something will pass, and Vermont will definitely make out on it. So,
Great. Okay, thanks, Tim. Representative Whitman.
Thank you, Matt. Dane Whitman, representing Bennington District 2-1, along with Tim, and this is my first term serving on the Human Services Committee, which, for those of you who don't know, covers a broad range of topics from childcare to substance use disorder, looking at long-term care, public health, people with disabilities, things like that. So kind of covering a large range of things. The big bill that we worked on for the majority of session was the child care bill, which we passed out of the House. Basically, the goals of it looking to make childcare more affordable, support childcare providers, create workforce development opportunities, scholarship and loan forgiveness for people entering the childcare field. Also, a long-term study to see essentially how we could fund closer to a universal childcare system where nobody pays more than 10% of their income on childcare, and the providers are compensated at a fair rate. Right now, I think the average wage for a childcare worker is about $13 an hour. So you see a lot of people leaving the childcare field who might be great, fit, talented, and going into pre-K because they can get public school benefits and wages. So looking to address that. We passed the bill out of committee, and then about 2 days later, President Biden signed the ARPA plan, and we found out we had $40 million to spend on childcare. So we kind of made some adjustments in some of our goals. Like Senator Sears said, we're still not completely clear on what we can spend the money on. So we're creating a little bit of a working group to report back and maybe, if necessary, make recommendations over the summer about how to spend that money. But we're hoping that by as early as this October, we could see some real changes in the affordability of childcare for people. Other things that we're working on, as far as substance use disorder is another big one. We have some one-time dollars going to support recovery centers around the state, like Turning Point Center here in Bennington would be one. Looking at, for sort of a long-term, excuse me, supporting home and community-based providers like United Counseling Services, essentially making sure that their wages are updated over time. Their Medicaid reimbursement rates are kind of meeting cost of living adjustments and things like that. And then other things just regarding kind of looking ahead. We're working on a PFAS ban bill, so that basically removing PFAS, like similar to PFOA, from things like food packaging, basically areas of highest exposure where it can get into your body, rugs and carpets, things like that. And then we are also working on a joint resolution to declare racism as a public health emergency. So that's something else that the committee's taken up. Look forward to hearing from all of the chamber members about any questions or anything like that. And good to be here with everybody.
Great, thank you, Representative Whitman. I did see, although I don't anymore, Representative Sbilia, are you on the call? I know you sometimes hop in and hop out. So Laura, if you're on the call, I want you to go so we don't lose you.
I am. Good morning.
So introduce yourself, especially for those that may say, why is there a representative from Windham on the call? But believe it or not, you service some of Bennington County too. So they may not know you as well as some of the other representatives.
Great. Thank you. Good morning. Yes, I represent the Windham Bennington district. So basically Route 100 from the Mass line up to Wardsboro, including the Bennington County towns of Stamford and Reedsboro. And I serve on the House Energy and Technology Committee. We have been working really hard on an energy or on a telecommunications bill, which was voted out and is now in the Senate. We are looking at the House actually voted out a proposal hoping to utilize $150 million in funds to build out. And the governor actually came out, I'm not sure how often this happens. The governor came out with a proposal subsequent to that with more money in it. So we'll see, we'll see where things land. That proposal calls for the development of basically a development office, a development entity to work with Vermont's CUDs. 2 years ago, we basically told Vermonters, no one's coming to save you. You're going to have to figure this out yourselves in terms of broadband. And here are a number of tools that you can use. We have 2 CUDs that have, well, there are CUDs throughout the state, including in Bennington County. So that's been successful. CUDs are 2 municipalities coming together and saying that that's a problem they want to solve, and sending regular citizens to those boards. We've provided those entities with planning dollars, technical assistance. They've been working with dedicated personnel at the Department of Public Service. And so this bill would envision further accelerating their efforts by standing up a development office, the Community Broadband Authority. Most of our CUDs, they're kind of on a continuum in terms of most ready to build and most newest, but they are all actually developing quite quickly. Those that are most ready to build or coming into that place really all have the same needs. They need technical assistance in terms of putting together the financial packages. There's a lot of money actually out there for broadband. And they also need technical assistance working with the national and other providers. In Southern Vermont, we really have, we have GMP and we have Consolidated, who are largely the 2 providers here for electric and telephone and internet service, which is who we envision partners being as part of this. Throughout much of Northern Vermont, there are a lot of additional smaller municipal utilities and phone companies who could also be partners. But so this authority would help the CUDs work with those entities and put together the financing. So $150 million came out of the House proposal. As I said, there's pre-construction dollars and then build dollars. That will not do the whole state, but it will actually stand up, get all of the CUDs to a place where they are revenue generating and able to continue their expansion on their own. This follows the very successful model from EC Fiber, and it actually takes lessons learned from EC Fiber so that we can do it in a shorter amount of time. In addition, we are starting to focus on AI in our committee. I don't think that's something that we'll take up this year, but if there are folks in Bennington County who are interested in state policy around AI, we'd encourage you to be in touch. And I also have been spending a lot of time on the waiting issue.
And I think we'll get to that as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Representative Sbilia. We're going to go over to Representative Nigro.
Thanks. Hi. Representative Michael Nigro. I'm in District 2-2. My seatmate is Mary Morrissey. And I sit on the Commerce and Economic Development Committee. So we spend a lot of our time on issues related to business, commerce, economic development, and a lot of the work we've done related to that has been COVID relief work, which I'll touch on a few of those. But we also do workforce development in our committee. So a lot of the work that Representative James was referring to is stuff that passes through our committee, and we spend a little bit of time on as well. And then we also work on all insurance except for health insurance. So this isn't usually the exciting topic I talk about. Most folks don't ask a lot of questions about captive insurance regulations, but at least this year it is a little bit more important because it covers unemployment insurance, which is a big deal affecting a lot of workers in the state and affecting a lot of employers in the state as well. So right now we're getting ready to do a lot more work on that. The Senate's finishing up work on S10, which is related to extending some COVID responses to the pandemic, and my committee will be working on that when that's over in the House. The two biggest bills we've worked on were a COVID relief bill and a large economic development bill. The COVID relief bill, I think the real headline stuff is some of the business grants and recovery grants that were part of that bill. And I'm happy to talk more about that, Matt, when questions arise. Just passed House and Senate last week, so some of those programs we're expecting to see pretty quickly, hoping to. And we also have done a lot of work on an economic development bill that passed the House a few weeks ago and is now in the Senate. And again, like you've heard a few times, there's a lot of really good stuff in this bill. There's a lot of questions about how funding is going to change some of it. So there's been a few things that we might put on hold because ARPA is going to, just as an example, Better Places program is a downtown revitalization program that was in this bill that might, that's going to lose a little bit of discussion about how we're going to utilize ARPA funds and if this program is still going to make the most sense. We had a part about extending downtown tax credits into neighborhood development areas, so surrounding parts of downtowns to spur apartment rental improvements. But again, ARPA might kind of steer us in a little different direction, and we might pause some of those. But there is a lot of good stuff, and no matter how it works out, I think there's a lot of support that a lot of these things are going to happen. It's just working out the way that makes the most sense.
Great, thanks, Representative Nigro, and we'll circle back around. I want to go to Representative Bongartz, and then we'll finish up with Representative Morrissey. And if anybody else hops on, we'll go there. But those are the last two. So Seth, good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Seth Bongartz, along with Kathleen James, I represent Bennington 4, Arlington, Manchester, Sandgate, and most of Sunderland. I'm on the Natural Resources Committee in the House. It's actually technically Natural Resources, Fish and Wildlife. We have passed out of our bill and will hit the House floor, I think as early as this week, bill to expand the redemption system for going beyond what we have now to include effectively water bottles, plastic water bottles, and wine bottles. The point of the bill is to reduce litter, for number one. That's one of the reasons. As we all know, those plastic water bottles especially end up in the trash and on the roadsides. And so it's to reduce litter, get less material into the landfill, and to really have the bottles that go in, bottles and cans and plastic that goes into the system through the redemption system is much more likely to end up getting truly recycled than materials that go in through a different part of the system. And so this is really a true recycling bill. So that's going to hit the House floor this week. I believe this week. It's possible it'll be the week after, but it'll hit the floor before the session's over. And I think it's likely that I'll get through the House. The other thing we're working on is Act 250. And without going into huge detail, what's really the emerging sort of consensus and the way that everybody's really beginning to approach Act 250 and the regulatory process is to try to encourage development in the downtowns. Be it, for instance, S101 came over from the Senate last week. And I believe we'll get this through the committee this year, and it'll likely pass the House. To say that if you're in a place where you can hook on to municipal systems, you don't need to go through the process of getting some of the permits that you would normally require, like to build a system. If you're hooking on, it's kind of logical. If you're hooking on to a system, you shouldn't have to get all the full panoply of permits. So that'll help make it a little bit more possible to do housing in the downtowns. So the process is that if downtowns go through the process of getting designated as designated downtowns, and there's a whole list of criteria for doing that, that they will be more able than now to simply be in charge of the permitting. The towns will be able to be in charge of the permitting themselves, as long as they're staying within the confines, within the requirements of the downtown designation. And that will make it, the whole point is to make it easier to especially build housing in the downtowns, and then at the same time be much more strategic, or even more strategic about what we're doing in the, if you will, the countryside, where forest fragmentation is a major issue, and one of the pieces of the bill to help alleviate pressures on forests, because we are, despite the fact you may not see it day to day, our forest blocks are getting fragmented at an alarming rate, which makes it much more difficult to manage and keep them producing the biodiversity and everything that they do. So it's more strategic outside, and more ability for towns to shape their futures themselves within the designated downtowns. So that's what's going on. Whether we'll get that out, I don't know if people have really mentioned this yet, but we're winding down. The session is winding down. I don't know if we'll, the normal sort of date that you think of adjourning is mid-May. Senator Sears may have a better sense of whether that's going to happen this year than I do, but if it is, then we're winding down fast. So so there's more going on in my committee, but I'll leave it at that. It's Act 250, and this week or next week on the floor of the bottle bill. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Bongartz. And we had a late game show up, but let's go to Representative Morrissey, and then we'll go to Representative Durfee. So Mary, are you on the call?
I am. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Representative Mary Morrissey. I represent District 22 with Mike Nigro, and I sit on institutions and corrections. My committee deals with a $126 million budget that deals with everything from statewide, state-owned building infrastructure, as well as water quality initiatives, air quality upgrades for schools, courts, and our state buildings. We deal with parts of parks and recreation, housing conservation. We kind of deal with a little bit of everything. Being that the other part of our committee deals with corrections, we've been extremely busy with the issues around COVID this year, especially in one of our northern facilities, which has had horrific outbreaks with the COVID, and in making sure that folks, not only staff, but those who are incarcerated, were able to be getting vaccinations, and that was important. We work closely, again, being that we're corrections.
I'll put my headset. Unless you want to hear this.
Does someone have a question?
Nope. No, keep going, Mary.
Okay. Dealing with corrections, we work closely with Senator Sears on a number of the issues and initiatives that come from his Senate Judiciary on, the different bills dealing with whether it's probation, kind of the running of our courts, and justice reinvestment, which we've looked at very strongly over the last couple of years to see how we can appropriately but safely get folks out of prison if they're eligible for it under the different criteria that will ultimately save dollars, but in saving the dollars, it would also go into such things as treatment for whether it's someone with an opioid issue or possibly mental health issues. As we know, corrections is not always the setting to get people the help that they need. So there's a great deal around all of that, but I will leave it at that, and certainly look forward to questions on other issues as well, because we all look to follow not only very much so in our committees, but we follow the appropriations, the Ways and Means, all the committees actually, and a lot of the work interacts with each other. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Representative Morrissey. And it should be noted, Representative Morrissey also serves on the Chamber of Commerce Board. So thank you for your service.
And I was going to say that for full disclosure.
I'll get it in there.
Thank you.
All right. I think last but certainly not least is Representative Durfee. You want to introduce yourself, tell us where you serve and what you're serving on. 2 minutes.
Sure. Yeah. Good morning, Matt. Sorry I was late today. Good morning, everyone. I'm David Durfee. I represent Shaftesbury, Sunderland, and I am serving this year on the House Ways and Means Committee. And I'm not sure whether anyone else covered this. Senator Sears may have talked about revenue. The state's revenue picture is looking pretty good. So we had an update the other day on the status of the sales tax, which goes into the education fund. It continues to look very strong. The income tax receipts are a little weird this year because of delays in the deadline. So people haven't been requesting refunds, which skews the outlook a little bit. Transportation, I'm sure Rep. Corcoran talked about that, so I won't go into that in any more detail. We've been working on a couple of things in committee that might be of interest to this group, one of which involves potential changes to the way that corporate taxes are calculated. And for those who have businesses that are not pass-through businesses, but actual corporations, Vermont has taxed historically using a combination of sales and property and the employees that you've got in your state when you're trying to figure out how much should you tax a corporation that does business in many states. And Most states essentially use just sales now for that calculation. So we're looking at bringing Vermont more into alignment with what other states do. It would have a net, slightly net negative impact on the total collection of taxes, corporate taxes, but by a light negative impact, I'd mean somewhere in the range of like $10 million. So there's a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of the budget, not enormous. We are looking at ways to offset that. We try to, when we make changes like this, try to make them revenue neutral. So I don't know how much time you allotted each person. I'm going to stop there, Matt, because
That's fine.
you probably want to hear from the members as well.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Representative Durfee. And I think that gets us through all our delegation. Anybody on here that I forgot, speak up now.
Senator Campion wants to apologize that he's not able to join us this morning. He's
Okay.
at the college, I'm sure, working very hard.
Great. Great. Thank you, Senator Sears. So with that in mind, there's not too much structure in this. I'm sure I could come up with some questions, but the point of all this is to hear from all of you, small business owners, nonprofits, civil activists, people that give back to their community. So with that in mind, I do want to open it up to Q&A. We can go as long as 9:30. It's 8:40 right now. We could spend the next couple of minutes on this as well. And I see John Goodrich, you have your hand up already, which is terrific. So you get us underway.
Well, I haven't been on these meetings before, and I'm duly impressed with our representatives and all they're doing, things that I don't ever think about, and that makes me feel better about Bennington and the greater area. I think more should be talked about maybe for the business section of the town than we are talking about. I know that broadband is certainly crucial to the businesses, and some of the other things, including Act 250, are very crucial. But I think directly advertising or promotion of the business is important. I did want to mention one thing that's bothering me some, is that the town has Putnam Project, which I happen to think is a wonderful concept, and it's going to help everybody, I think. But I don't like them courting my tenants to move from my place to the Putnam when it is government money that is put together that $30-some million and now $50-some million project. When the private sector, myself included, I don't think I've ever asked for a dime from anybody. Now they're courting my customers. That just doesn't seem like it's legitimate. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to listen to what you had to say. Thank you.
And at this point, I will leave it up. I'm not sure there's a complete question there, just more of a statement, but I do want to provide an opportunity for any of our delegation to weigh in on that. And then Karen, I see your hand is up, so we'll go to you after. All right, let's go to Dick. Did you?
Well, I was just going to mention that I understand John's concern. That's really something that should be taken up with the regional commission and the BCIC, frankly. But I wanted to mention that part of the governor's use of the latest COVID relief plan is about 200 million in housing. And part of that money, I think about 24.5 million would be going to the Putnam Project for housing, for mixed, income housing. The effort of the governor in that proposal is to eliminate the use of motels for the homeless. And some of the money goes to shelters, but the bulk of it would go to housing projects, and Putnam would come into that. So there may be that same argument that in some of those cases, they'd be looking at moving people from private landlords to Putnam projects. So I understand John's concern.
Yep.
Most of my tenants, Dick, are all commercial, not housing. Yeah. And it just seems to me that they shouldn't be trying to take away my customers to help themselves. And so if I go to BCIC, it's to their advantage to court some of my customers.
Yep.
And they certainly have a lot more money to spend on what the customer may want.
No, I was mentioning that because I hear the same complaint from landlords frequently about public housing projects.
Sure.
Where the public housing project, like Shire's housing, takes people from private landlords to public.
I agree.
Okay.
May I,
for sake of time, Representative Morrissey.
I just wanted to say I am bothered to hear that. But like Dick said, it probably is more in the arena of the BCIC and our regional development group. I truly sorry to hear that because initially we've been told that most of the project was secure with having businesses and other entities coming in. So that is a bit bothersome, and I'm sorry that's happening to you, John.
Great. Thank you for that added bit, Representative Morrissey. We do have 3 hands, so here's how the queue is going to work. We have Karen Jernigan up next, and we're going to go to Brian Maggiato. Then we have Denise Monte, and we now have Shannon McClenathan, I believe. So let's go to Karen first, and then we'll go to Brian.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks everyone for hosting and participating in this morning. I had a sales meeting, so I had to jump in late, but I wanted to just ask everyone in leadership here, what's being done on the energy and clean energy infrastructure front for some new incentive programs. I'm learning quite a bit as a new Vermonter as of last year that our neighbors, Massachusetts, of course, and even New York, we're hosting an online event with New York's National Grid on Thursday about all the solar incentive programs. And I know this has to do with GMP, and they're not on this event as well, but I wonder what's being done legislatively and as business owners, how we can rally for continued progress on not just solar, but just clean energy infrastructure for Southern Vermont in particular.
So any representative or senator want to take a crack at that?
I'm not sure if we have anybody to serve on there, but I can reiterate as far as the transportation sector, which I mentioned in my comments early, is the electric vehicles. The state has set up a program over the last 2 to 3 years, and we continue to put roughly around $3 million to incentivize people to buy electric vehicles and, to get off the gas powered vehicles. So that's one aspect as far as the transportation field. Another one is we're buying buses for public transit. We're spending millions of dollars to on that aspect. But as far as everything else, I'm not sure who would have the expertise, but transportation, that's the 2 big things that we're doing to help the environment.
I see Representative James, your hand is up with this question.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. Just to chip in a few more factoids, I know that Rep. Sbilia could speak to this, but I know she's driving right now, so she probably can't chime in. But as we consider how to spend the ARPA money, both the budget that the House has passed, but also in particular Governor Scott's more detailed proposal about how to put that money into buckets does include, I think he recommended a $200 million investment in climate action that would range all the way from building out, as Rep. Corcoran said, building out EV infrastructure all across the state, to weatherization at scale, a significant expansion of the incentives and programs that can help Vermonters, save money by weatherizing their homes, expanding weatherization to public buildings like schools and municipal buildings. We already do that with government buildings, but so I think there's a lot of thought going on right now about how some of these federal funds can be invested basically in climate infrastructure, including stormwater, resiliency type measures, hazard mitigation, helping people and communities and businesses move out of flood-prone areas. So there's a lot of thought going on. And at the same time as this conversation is happening, the Vermont Climate Council is working on a sweeping climate plan for Vermont as required by the Global Warming Solutions Act. And they've got 5 subcommittees working weekly, and the first draft of their report is going to come out in October for public comment.
Great, thank you, Representative James. I see Representative Bongartz, your hand is up as well.
Just a quick to add on to that a little bit, I think, and Tim might mention this, I think there was also money for bicycles and building roads to better accommodate bicycles. That's a little piece of it. But part I was going to mention is that the whole notion of putting housing in downtowns is a major climate initiative indirectly, because people are in a position where they don't have to drive everywhere, they can walk. And if you're connecting, so the money that's going to come in through ARPA and otherwise from the state to help with build sewer and water infrastructure helps bring people into the downtowns in a way that does all kinds of things we want. But one of them is to build truly walkable lifestyles, which helps a lot. So, by the way, nobody mentioned, I forgot to mention, one of the things this isn't directly responsive to the question, but it's really kind of cool, is that in the budget is $10 million basically for trail systems. It's outdoor recreation, but it's really it's going to end up being for trail systems. And there was a huge effort within some people in my committee, and very early on in the session to try to get a couple $100,000 in, and all of a sudden there's 10 million for trails, and that's about lifestyle. That's about making Vermont more attractive and being a place where, as we're trying to attract younger people to come to the state, if we can build out more trail systems, that's one of the things people are looking for. And so we just have this one-time opportunity to get this money out there and put some better trail systems in place. And that's kind of exciting as well.
Great, thank you, Representative Bongartz. Just because we have so many hands raised, we're going to move on to the next question. And this one, I believe, is going to come from Brian Macchiato.
Yeah. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Senator Sears, and our representatives on the call. You guys had a very interesting last couple months. As you mentioned, I mean, we are coming towards a close of the session, and it seems like there's still a lot of uncertainty about how these dollars can actually be spent until we have further guidance from the federal government. The proposals all seem great, but they do glaringly, in my opinion, leave out small business. We see language from the administration that talks about $500 million in unmet need within our small business community, and yet the current appropriation only has $50 million allocated to small business grants, many of which is being earmarked for businesses that have not or were not eligible to receive PPP funds or previous CARES Act relief grants that were made available in 2020. I can understand the excitement from the administration of getting infrastructure projects underway. And I'd be the first to say Vermont needs a lot of this stuff desperately. But as representatives of our communities here, we believe that there is some obligation and responsibility for all of you to make sure we are not left behind. Our businesses, in many cases, were closed for at least 3 months. If you're in the lodging or hospitality sector, reduced occupancy meant you could only make half going all the way through October. I mean, the period was a long one, and the clawback for a lot of us is going to take over 2 to 3 years before we can return to 2019 levels. So it's my hope in sharing some of this that you will reach out to those constituents in each one of your districts to understand what's happening, and where some of these dollars may need to be appropriated to ensure that we have a vital downtown economy when things get back to normal, and that we have a vital community to enjoy a lot of the infrastructure projects that you're hoping to get underway. We can't really put the cart before the horse, so to speak, and we need to make sure that our small businesses and main streets thrive through this and beyond. So, this is more of a plea for me that when you make these decisions and when you vote, that you are really considering all the impact that this is going to have on our small businesses, and things like taxing PPP in 2021 will have a negative impact if that's the direction that the state goes down. So really weighing the options that are being presented to you by other committees is going to be incredibly important as we try to get out of this pandemic period, but really, give it a second thought whenever possible to make sure that you understand the impact that these decisions are going to have. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Brian. And so I do want to open it up to our delegation to make any comments. You can raise a hand, or you don't have to. You can hop right in. Representative Nigro.
Thanks. I certainly think that, Brian, a lot of that statement, that's a lot of the conversation we've certainly been having in our committee. And I think to some degree, a lot of that's recognizing that it really is different industry by industry. Obviously, our tourism and hospitality industry, I think we recognize is going to just need as much support as we are able to provide. We're also seeing that there was other industries that are coming out of things in decent shape, and frankly, there's been winners as well. So I think some of this is about being focused moving forward. The business gap grant, the new grant program that I referenced earlier is $10 million, which is way too small to come close to having a big impact on the unmet need in the state. And it is largely focused on folks that haven't received PPP, but that program is funds left over. And I think there's going to be funds left over after giving them to folks that haven't received any PPP, will go to businesses that have unmet need. And we're using that program to get a better sense of what the needs are for the next program that we know is going to have to be stood up. So I appreciate that input, and I agree with a lot of what you said.
Other representatives, Senator, want to comment on just small business? Much of what Brian's plea was. Senator Sears, I see you.
Yeah, well, I had somebody at the door. I'm sorry I missed any responses to Brian, but I wanted to, it's unusual to say only 50 million, given what we usually put into small businesses and help. But I will say that understanding we won't know exactly how this new money can be used until the end of May at best. And so part of this, what we're going through and trying to adjourn by mid-May is looking at what will be spent in FY22 and FY23, because this money allows you to go a lot further. I appreciate everything Brian said, and as you know, I think this entire delegation has been supportive of small business and making sure we get money to the businesses that really need it and have been most hurt by this pandemic. So we'll plan as we mark up the budget to keep that in mind, but understand that we don't know yet how all this money can be used. I think a lot of decisions will be up once again to the Joint Fiscal Committee and to next year's legislature.
Great, thank you, Senator Sears. Not seeing any other pop on. That's fine. We'll hop on to the next person in the queue, which is going to be Denise Monte. Good morning, Denise.
Good morning. I have a couple of comments and a question all around wages and the labor force. And so right now, you know, the small businesses, my parents own 2 chocolate shops. So small businesses, I call them micro businesses because small businesses mean 50 employees. We don't have that. And right now we have even less because even though we do have some business in our store coming back, we can't find employees for a couple of reasons. One is that there are no employees to be had. People are getting extra money to be on unemployment, and people are taking advantage of that. That works out well for the lower minimum wage kind of workers. For people who are making more money than that, there's more of an incentive for them to try to go back to work. But on the lower end of things, it's just almost impossible to find workers. Kind of tying into that, I know there's been discussion about making the minimum wage to $15, and there's a cost to that, right? It's beneficial to the workers to get paid $15, but the small businesses can't afford to pay those kinds of wages. Everyone would have to be raised up, and so we're kind of in a quandary. We want to get workers. The way to get workers may be to offer a significantly higher wage, but we can't afford to do that without raising our prices, and then we won't. So like we're in a vicious cycle. So I guess I just wanted to throw out there, to be aware of some of those things. But I know also that the Vermont Department of Labor was looking at trying to recruit workforce, not high-end workers, but lower-end workers, people maybe from other countries that might come in for itinerant work. I don't know, but I just kind of wanted to put that out there and see what was being done with regard to that. There's certainly a tourist season. There's a couple of times of year that are more focused toward tourism, and maybe there could be some support, like putting that all together to help some small businesses. So I guess it was more of a statement, but just asking what might be being done on those fronts.
Great, thank you, Denise, and some great points there. So I want to open it up to the delegation. Representative Durfee.
Yeah, thanks, Denise, for the question. And it's such a huge issue, and a systemic type of solution is really, I think, what we would need to try and get our arms around. And it sort of goes back to the previous question about allocating scarce resources. And even though we're talking about tremendous amounts of money coming into the state through ARPA and the previous 2 rounds, there's still, it seems like, not enough to go around. So we have $500 million in unmet need for small businesses, but the governor's proposal only allocates 50, and the legislature had only allocated 10 at this point. There was not anything in the governor's broad framework, I think, for workforce development, which is what we're talking about here, I think. It also goes back to, I would say, childcare. We need to provide more support for families so that we have a larger future workforce. So there's not an answer. I think we all hear the question, and if we had a solution, we wouldn't need to be talking about it today. It would already be in development. But thank you for bringing it up again, and it ties in obviously to the minimum wage and to other issues. So this is a huge issue.
Great, thank you, Representative Durfee. Representative Whitman, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Matt. And thank you, Denise, for those comments. Yeah, just echoing what Representative Durfee said a little bit. I think what I heard a lot in your questions, Denise, and what it makes me think is sort of what's the process where we meet some of these goals, you know, and how do you keep the cart and the horse kind of in their right, you know, placement. So I think some of the things that we're looking at investing in right now, as far as affordable housing and broadband and childcare, I see as sort of laying a foundation, and hopefully to sort of do so in a way that levels the playing field in a way so that sort of like, what kind of advantages or disadvantages do you want to level out? So a working family, for example, that's why it's really important to invest in childcare, right? And then that can kind of lead to greater wages in that route. Making sure that we can kind of target wages for people providing mental health, counseling, really looking at early childhood development, substance use disorder counseling, mental health needs. I think just really looking at workforce development, both being attracting people to the state, but also looking at the people that are here and how are they supported and able to realize their best potential to engage in the workforce, I think is another angle that we can take as far as helping our entire economy. And ideally, through doing that, we can begin to have a more vibrant economy, and things like minimum wage can be more doable.
Great, thank you, Representative Whitman. I will make a comment just from the Chamber's perspective. Erica was reminding me, we do have an April 28th program, a lunch and learn around what we called employee roulette. And that's with the Department of Labor and some other characters. So absolutely hop on that. And just from the little tiny bit that this chamber can do, you know, obviously we have the State of State program. We've been doing that monthly now on digital calls. We hope to get back to the weekends where we invite people up to Vermont to try it out for a weekend. We've had some really great success there. I think everybody's seen in the headlines the amount of people moving to Vermont. Not sure that answers completely the lower wage worker, but we have had talks about State to Stay supplying and helping with some of that. Eric and I often talk with and talk about the trades people as well, and a need, and looking at Brenda and others that are in the housing market, the need for good tradespeople as well. So I think between the State of State program, the Southern chapter of the Vermont Welcome Wagon, and even our Shire's Young Professionals, there's just some programming elements or initiatives that we're trying to do what little we can. I think there's some bigger things at play here. And the last little thing that I'll add is some of our group programming. We continue to look at areas, and what I mean by group programming or group initiatives. If you remember healthcare, being able to consolidate small businesses so that we have an edge on healthcare and being able to offer healthcare for our employees, acting as a big organization under the umbrella of a chamber. Can't do that. We still offer vision and dental, and we are looking at 401k. But I think that from a chamber perspective specifically, and what you pay into to be a member, I think there's something there. When big corporations, take the Amazons and the Walmarts, are trying to attract people, they have a benefits package. It's very tough for the Denises of the world to have a benefits package, like you said, as a micro business. So are there ways that the chamber can come alongside as an umbrella organization and offer some more benefits, whether that be 401k, whether that be daycare, and things like that? So just know that please send us your ideas, utilize the State of State program, the Welcome Wagon, the Young Professional Group at what little bit that we can. I know Erica and I are big this year on the share economy. So how are three businesses getting together to make an event, to make an experiential event for the three businesses? How are 3 or 4 businesses getting together to cross promote one another? I think there's something there when it comes to employees. How are 3 restaurants and bars getting together to share what little bartending staff, what little wait staff they have? So food for thought. Up next, I have Shannon McClenathan, I believe. Your hand is up. Then I have Chris Oldham, and at one point, Wendy Cowart, you had your hand up, but we'll go to Shannon first.
Thanks, Matt. Shannon McClenathan, work for the Bank of Bennington, and also the chair for the Oak Hill Children's Center in Pownell. So kind of 2 things. It was workforce related. even as a bank who's a small business, we have 55 employees, we struggle getting teller positions, and people aren't even applying. That's the challenge. There's just not a need or an incentive for people to be looking for jobs, and for a small business like the chocolate shop, they don't necessarily have all the benefits. Well, we have all the benefits and still can't get people to apply. So it's definitely a challenge across the board, no matter how hard we try, raising, the starting wage and, all the packages still is not incentive enough for people to apply. And then as far as the childcare piece, I just want to say thank you all for your work in the childcare arena. That was huge. We struggle with attracting teachers and keeping them as we compete with with the supervisory union with all the benefits. But we've seen a lot of families leave because they can't afford it. And early child care is so critical for the future. So thank you all for your work on that.
Thanks, Shannon. Chris Oldham.
Thanks, Matt. And also thank you, Erica, for putting these programs together. I often thank you for this because what comes out of the chamber and these this type of thing is really beneficial for me, and I think others too. So keep that up. And also thank you to the representatives for taking the time to meet with us. I know it's not easy, and I served on the select board for 9 years, and I'll never get those years back. So I appreciate what you all do for the community. But I'm the executive director for Park McCullough, and one of the things that we're trying to do is, yes, we are a historic site, but we are branching out to offer the community much more than just a historic site. We are dipping into more of the educational realm, the cultural realm, and things like that. And by doing that, not only has it benefited our community and engaged more in the public, we have been able to qualify for different types of grants, and also that engagement has sparked an interest in private donors and community members that have been able to help us kind of move our new mission forward. I typically don't like to ask for money, and I know that all of you are in a position where people are constantly asking you for money. That even goes to the local businesses. I grew up in a small business, and it was very often that people would come in, whether it was the high school group or the Little League or somebody looking for something. I know that small businesses have that obligation to give, or feel that obligation to give back even when they can't. And a lot of small businesses are nonprofits themselves. So, but coincidentally, with my role at the homeless shelter as a director for years, and then now my role here as an executive director, as much as I don't like asking for money, I feel like I found a career in asking for money. So I'm specifically asking for some information on historic preservation, specifically because it's important, to Vermont and New England, that we maintain our historic sites, and a lot of historic sites are private. And I know that there is money available in terms of grants because we have been the recipient of some. But I'm wondering if there is new initiative or new support or something along those lines that will support the historic sites like Park McCullough. As you can imagine, a 50,000 square foot 155-year-old home with a carriage barn is really, I think Seth can probably appreciate this more than anyone on the group here, how difficult it is to maintain, such a structure, especially one that gives so much to the community, and has a lot of personal connection to so many people in the community. So I guess to narrow down my question, is there anything in the pipeline coming down that I can get excited about when it comes to historic preservation, and where Park McCullough and places like Hildene and several other places that might be able to get additional funding. I'm thinking right now that we have probably a 2 to 3 year period before the veranda at the Park McCullough falls off, because it is literally sinking into the ground, and we have to come up with a significant amount of money to save the veranda. And we're just not quite sure where that's going to come from. We have a handful of people who are supportive financially, but we are going to ask the community for a broader capital campaign. But part of that is looking for state funding too. So with that said, I'll give you the floor.
Great, thank you, Chris. I appreciate from the infrastructure perspective what you're asking, and I'll even on your coattails add in, obviously, and it's been mentioned here before, but one of our main interests will always be around travel and tourism. And I know places like Park McCullough and Hildene and others also rely on that. I know there's a great big effort to put a lot more money behind reopening Vermont and telling the world that Vermont's open again. And so obviously as a chamber, we'd be remiss if we didn't encourage our delegation to continue the good fight for tourism and travel dollars, especially at a regional level. We absolutely support the Vermont Department of Tourism and Marketing, chairing their council and everything, but we can't throw all the money there. We need our partners around the regions who understand their regions the most to be helped as well. But with Chris's question, I do want to open it up to our delegation as well. Any comment on historical or infrastructure as it pertains to the history and vitality of Vermont?
I'll make a comment, Matt. Chris, under institutions, used to take up in a small manner, though, some of these initiatives. I think the last funding that we were able to get for Park McCullough was a number of years ago in regards to, I believe it was some of the roofing infrastructure that was needed to be done. Those specific grants at this point are not really fully available, but I'm not sure if there will be anything coming in based upon some of the infrastructure funds coming in from the federal government that could be looked to possibly help. But I will definitely keep an eye open on any of those initiatives going forward.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mary.
I also saw Representative Bongartz, you had, yep.
I was only going to agree. I have been where you are. I know exactly what you're talking about. And I have been thinking about this, and it is I'm glad you reminded us all, because it really is critical that we maintain our historic structures. They're part of the reason people come to Vermont. They're huge draws. You're a draw, Hildene's a draw, a major draw, and we are together. And that's true all over Vermont. So we have to be careful that we look at this question. I'm glad you reminded us. So I'll actually make a call into historic preservation and do a little of my own digging. So thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Great. Wendy, you had your hand up, so I just want to make sure we go back to you first. And Edie, I see your hand up next. Wendy?
So Denise actually started the conversation the exact conversation that I wanted to bring up, coming up with some way to incentivize people to go back to work. My husband owns the Dutchman's Tavern, as you know, and but I work for Workforce and Development. So I'm just, it's frustrating for everyone. I'm getting calls from employers every day now. This is what I need. This is what I need. And I'm so afraid, like, when they stop paying that extra $300, that everyone's gonna feel like I have to get a job, and then we're gonna have that as the problem. So I just feel like there's got to be a way. I would love to see something where people who have been working throughout this whole thing and working from home and doing what they have to do, I'd love to see some incentivizing for those folks too, like tax break or something for working all year. But I would love to see them take that extra money and give it to the people to go back to work so that we can, you know, so businesses can run.
Great. Thanks, Wendy. Anybody want to comment on that? And just I see Senator Sears, just remind us what's federal and what's state, and maybe what we can control by a little bit, but what we can't really control at all. But Senator Sears?
At some point in the near future, hopefully this will be over, the pandemic, I mean, but what it has highlighted is, number one, there are probably reasons for not going back to work for every person who's on unemployment that, you know, are not general. But I will say that childcare is a problem when kids are not in school. So your choices are to stay home with the kids, either male or female, and somebody else goes out to work because you can't afford both. I think it also will be fairly soon, I hope, that when the pandemic is somewhat over, that the requirement that you can collect unemployment without searching for work is over. I think that's going to create some incentive. I think it's a great idea to provide some incentives to go back to work, but also some incentives for those that have worked throughout this pandemic. We tried to do that with a plan for those making under $25,000 a year. We did give bonuses out last year. But I do want to say, I mean, one of the things that's interesting, I was reading the banner this morning, 50% of Bennington County has been vaccinated. And I suspect that's partly because we're so old. We have an aging population here. And as some alluded to, we need to be attracting younger people here in Bennington County. And so I think that demographic is catching up to us in some ways in this workforce problem. I don't know if you're seeing that, but, and here I am speaking as somebody who is over 75. So I think that demographic is catching up to us. We need to deal with that.
Great, thank you, Senator Sears. Anyone else that wants to comment on Wendy's thoughts? I mean, again, I think when we knew we were coming into the legislative update, we knew it was probably going to be on two big things. One of them, obviously, being the perceived windfall of Vermont with the monies coming in, but right on the heels of that, the unemployment and unable to find good workforce is something we hear every day at the chamber as well, Wendy. So thank you for sharing. I see Representative Whitman's hand is up.
Thanks, Matt. I just wanted to follow up a little bit on Wendy's comment, and thank you, Dick, for your clarification around that. I agree. Glad you mentioned the hazard pay and those bonuses, and then looking at that requirement for searching for work to end. A couple of things I wanted to add. Really in the early stages, we had a joint committee meeting between the Senate and the House Human Services. In the Senate, it's Health and Human Services. Just really taking a step back and looking at a reach up program, which is essentially for low income financial economic support. And I think it hasn't been updated, I think, in about 2 decades. And just taking a look at what are those dollar amounts, what are the kind of benefit cliffs that go along with that, and taking a close look at that program is something that could be down the line. We had a meeting and just sort of explored what other options there might be. Another thing I want to say, also bouncing off of Senator Sears' thought about demographics, is I think we can't leave diversity and inclusivity out of the conversation when it comes to demographic shifts and making Bennington and our workforce more welcoming for all people that can be either current or potential Vermonters. One thing that our committee has worked with is refugee resettlement, and most of that right now is in Chittenden County. So I'm interested to see how that could be expanded, and interested to hear people's thoughts about looking at making Bennington a welcome home for people that are ready to become new Vermonters. So that's just another thought I have.
Great. Thank you, Representative Whitman. And that's been on my thought, as you know, as Dane also serves on our Shire's Young Professional Board. He and I have good conversations, so it just reminds me to follow up with you for that and see what we might be able to do. We know that the Apple Barn has a strong, great program. Obviously, it got a little disrupted with COVID, but Leah and the gang there do a terrific job with I believe people from Jamaica. So it'd be fun to have you and her and maybe some others throughout the county that are poking at this thing of bringing in new Americans. So last but not least, by any measure, Edie and Michael, I know you had your hand up. We want to get to you. We've got about 5 minutes left, so let's pose a question or statement that you have, and we'll ask our delegation for some final answers. Edie?
I just wanted 1 minute, just with conversation about Park McCullough and Hildene. Let's not forget the Bennington Museum, which is vital to Bennington and has its building and grounds issues all over the place, as well as bringing lots of great stuff, but needs a lot of support and work. Thank you.
Okay. With that, Edie has single-handedly allowed us to end this meeting early so everybody can get on their day. Thank you, Edie and Michael. I want to thank everybody for hopping on this call. If you need contact information for any of the senators or representatives, please just reach out to our office. And thank you again for taking some early time in the beginning of the week to hop on this call. We will probably be back in the fall. Usually we try to arrange something with the Vermont Chamber to talk a little bit more business focused and what we can prepare for the session that starts in the fall. So stay tuned. Otherwise, join us for that April 28th Lunch and Learn. And as always, have a great, safe, and prosperous week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.